Okay, so now we're going to move to the last session of the evening. So this is going to be about breakthroughs in public engagement. And to moderate and lead this session, I'm going to welcome back to the stage Eco America's president, Bob Perkowitz.
I got to get the rest of my team with me here. Gets a little bit crowded when 5 people are moving in and 5 people are moving out of that room. This is a session on engaging Americans on climate change, which, if we want a good, strong, powerful solution, if we want public demand for climate solutions, we're going to have to get more people on board. I was just going to start with a couple of slides. No. Hold it, there's another clicker in here. Megan, can I have the other clicker? All right, this is my idea. I think what we'll do is we'll introduce the panel and start the discussion. And then if Megan, Ashley, if you guys could see, oh, I'll be darned. Okay, let me just start with this then. Here to talk about engaging people, Americans on climate change. Things are moving in the right direction. This is Gallup over the last 20 years. The people in the green line at the top are people who are concerned believers. And as you can see, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've been activating more and more people are getting concerned about climate change in America. This is a poll taken last week, released yesterday, about Democrats. Somebody said earlier today that Democrats, their number 2 issue is climate change. And right now the polls are saying that the number 1 issue for Democratic voters in the primaries in the election next year is climate change. Just another good sign. We're moving that direction. Impeaching Donald Trump is only number 5. I mean, that shows you how important climate change is. So at Eco America, you know, that's what our mission is to engage Americans on climate change. We've got 3 programs, and the way we do it is we build these leadership circles of very smart, knowledgeable people in each sector, get them to engage their institutions, and then we provide resources and support and hopefully get them to make commitments to climate action and actually do things. And it's been working out real well. But the concept is that if you can flip the sectors in society, you can flip society. So we spent our first 6 years working on higher ed. We did 5 programs. I think higher education is arguably at least 5 years and maybe 10 years ahead of any other sector in society. And hopefully we will get everybody else on board too. We ground our work in an incredible amount of research. Just go to the Eco America website, go into research, and you'll see there's values research, communications research, polling, talking points, all different kinds of things. Because when we're working with the Methodist Church or the American Academy of Pediatrics, we don't want to guess at what we're saying to their millions of constituents. We want to know. We want to do focus groups and dial tests and surveys and polling so that we know what we're asking them to do or saying that they should say. We know that it works. It's not just a guess. So tons of research on connecting on climate change. And just have, I think, 4 lessons here that from all that I just wanted to share. And the first one is that people go together in tribes. If you're thinking about voters, you should be thinking about groups of voters more than you should be thinking about a demographic or you should be thinking about individual voters. We absolutely have to get out the vote and go door to door and knock on people. But if you can go up to a church, your church, and you can go up and say, hey, we need to have solar panels on this church. We need to help our congregants do things. You can get a lot more leverage. One person can turn into 250 people or 500 people by getting people in the groups with leaders that they trust. The other thing, and there's a positive and negative version to this. The negative version is that there's competing priorities. Nobody in America has climate change, virtually nobody, as their absolute number one issue. They care about their family, they care about something else, and climate change might be their biggest public issue, but they have other priorities. And if you want to engage any Americans, you have to figure out what their priorities are, and you have to tie climate change to it. It's like when we go out and we talk to public health officials, the presentation isn't on health and climate. And when we go to pediatricians, the presentation isn't on health and climate. When it's pediatricians, it's on children. When it's to public health people, it's on public health. If we're in Salt Lake City, every slide is about Salt Lake City. It is about nothing else except where those people are and what they care about. And that's what you have to connect with if you want to get Americans to listen to what you're doing. And if you do get them on any one issue, you get them all. Once you believe in any part of climate change, you believe in the whole thing. There is a thing that we call Techno Optimism. This comes out of our values research, and there's a lot of people that think that, oh, if I just can get nuclear power very inexpensively, or if I can put a price on carbon, or I can do this, we can solve this. You know, the technology can solve it. And it is really a bigger problem than that. It's a social problem, but there's a bunch of books out there that are best-selling books that say, hey, we're all getting healthier. People are living longer. There's less wars. There's less crime. Everything is good. But if you say, instead of looking at a 100-year or a 1,000-year horizon, try a 10 or 20-year horizon. And instead of looking backwards, look forwards, and you might see a different picture. So I just want to say it's just not a simplistic, easy solution. There's a bunch of things that we have to do, and we can do them, but don't think that just any one of them is going to solve it. The other thing, and this is just 6 rules that we have boiled our communications down to. The first thing is salience, which means that it's real. You can see it with your own eyes. There's impacts. That's become pretty easy in America right now. The second thing is relevance, and that's why I say pediatricians to pediatrician, personally relevant. You have to connect with it. Solutions. And usually there's a word in front of that, which is the word unambiguous. If people don't believe that there are solutions, they will not act. If it's just like the government shutdown, when Trump shut down the government for 6 weeks, and nobody thought that was good. But what can you do about it? So you don't act. So if you're talking to a group of people, you have to tell them that and it is true that there are solutions. We just have to implement them. And agency means that they can make a big difference. And like I say, if you think about climate change, if you as an individual, what can you do? Well, but if you think about you as an army of the associations, the organization you work at, your church, your community, you can get a lot of leverage, and everybody can make a difference. It's like a pebble in a pond versus a brick in a wall. We all need to be pebbles, or maybe even something bigger, hitting the water. And then the last thing is that we've just kind of come up with over the last year is that we have a moral responsibility, that you are not doing good unless you're doing something about climate change. You're hurting a lot of people. So that's basically it for the lesson. And like I said on the earlier slide, we're moving from talking to action. And if you have that guide, everybody has access today to the Moving Forward Guide for Faith. So if you say, we have learned that you cannot just go up to people in a church and say, do something about climate change. You have to give them very specific guidance and very specific support. So we have an energy program for congregations. We have an offset program for congregations. We have in that guide, how you contact your local representative and engage in policymakers on climate change. And then the very last page, thanks to my good friend Reverend Antal here somewhere, we have civil disobedience. We're telling people to get ready to protest. It's not time to be calm about this. It's time to do what Evan and the young people are telling us. We got to get out there and do something about climate change now. So maybe I am a little bit hysterical. And this, I just did the opening spread here. I want to thank the 10 denominations that joined us in this guide. But it's real simple. What do you need to know about climate change if you don't know? What do you need to do? How do you mitigate? How do you advocate? And And how do you adapt? How do you make your church a place of sanctuary and refuge if something happens? So it's just basic good stuff that people need to know if they want to turn their church into a place of refuge. Okay. These people on the stage are my friends. I've known them all for at least 10 years. And they are all very smart people. At least two of them are very funny, and one of them is a little bit more serious than he needs to be. We'll let you figure out which is which. But, Celinda Lake runs an organization called Lake Research Partners in Washington, D.C. It is one of the most respected and largest polling and communications organizations, progressive organizations. She's unabashedly progressive. She is a consultant. She's a major strategist to the Democratic Party. She's probably the leading person in America on women's issues and how to connect with women on women's issues. And she does, Lake Research Partners is our research partner in 85% of the research that we do at EcoAmerica. So welcome to Celinda. Let me introduce everybody first so I don't have to do it one at a time and then I don't have to get up and down. Karen Florine, we had Ben Strauss, the CEO of Climate Central, on the agenda on your program. Lucky for us, he can't make it and we get Karen. I have known Karen since Environmental Defense Fund days. Right now, she's the Vice President of Programs at Climate Central, and she's just served in the Deputy Climate Envoy at the State Department in the Obama administration. So she knows, Climate Central, if you don't know, is an organization that is moving the weathercasters and a lot of other people in America. If you want to know sea level rise or anything, I'm sure she's going to tell us about it. Third person, many of you probably know, is Joe Romm. Joe is a Ph.D. at American Progress, and he's the founding editor of climateprogress.org. Anytime there's a complex issue and I don't know what to think about it, I go try to find something that Joe wrote about it, and then I understand what Joe did. And he's gotten so much into the connecting with people that that's going to be his primary thing today. He's going to tell us how to do that. And lastly, Matt Nisbet. I've been working with Matt for more than a decade, too. He is a professor at Northeastern University. He is also the editor of the Journal of Climate Communications. Environmental communities. This guy put together the biggest book on climate communications I've ever seen. I think it costs does it cost $120 a copy? A little bit more than that. But if I'm not kidding, just look for his name and look for the word big book in Google and you will see this encyclopedia of climate communications. And I have two copies, thank you, one at home and one at work. And every time I get confused about how to talk to somebody, I go to the journal. It's only about a year old. But most recently, he, in last month's edition of Scientific American?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's online.
Yeah, finding your dharma in the age of climate change.
Yeah.
And I don't want to start quoting some of the passages about what he felt like after he read the IPCC report and how he reflected back on his whole life and what it really meant. And again, you couldn't have four people that know more about connecting on climate change than these four people. And Celinda's going to go first.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. And I really want to thank Bob for his amazing leadership and work trying to figure out how to work across sectors, which I think is very, very, very important work in creating this sector-based communication. I also want to introduce Jonathan Voss, who's somewhere in the crowd here, who is a partner in our firm and the head of our climate change team and our environmental team, and really the yeoman behind much of this work. While I am an avowed progressive, I also want to say that I was born and raised a Republican on a ranch in Montana and was a national office holder in Teenage Republicans, which on my side of the aisle is like saying you were a teenage werewolf. I hope I still maintain some of those sensibilities. And what I really, really like about the work and the leadership that Eco-America has shown is its way of approaching sectors, including sectors of faith, economic sectors, et cetera, because I think we are truly all in this together. So what I'm going to do is give you a very fast tour of the landscape in terms of some of the data that we have done on Green New Deal for Eco-America. And what is really, really amazing is that, and one of the things that I think is so interesting about this panel is that the public is way, way ahead of the political dialogue. Now, if you're in Washington, it's not too hard to be way, way ahead of the political dialogue. And in some state capitals are like that as well. But indeed, I think that we underappreciate how really, how we can move the public forward. And one of the things that's really critical to that is the frame of this conference, which is the frame of solutions. And very often, people on the progressive side, in particular in the environmental movement, we focus on problems. Well, guess what? People have problems and they're not looking to inherit yours. And nobody wants to buy a deck chair on the Titanic. So people are looking for solutions, and they believe that not only are we techno optimists, but we believe we're very solution oriented. We can get her done. And in fact, that offers one of the greatest opportunities right now. It also offers one of the greatest pitfalls. One of the things that is really making this a moment of some urgency is the public sense of, gosh, contrary to what we thought, maybe we've lost our way in terms of solutions. Maybe we've lost our way in terms of joining together to solve problems. So I'm very, very interested in what the rest of the panel has to say, because I think this is a unique time for public engagement. But if we look at the data, here you see that concern has been rising over time across party lines on climate change. And this is yet another piece of data, and it sounds like you've gotten a lot of data already. 90% of Democrats are concerned, 59% very, very concerned, but 2/3 of independents are concerned, and a solid half of Republicans are concerned. There's also a very, very interesting data point that is growing in the difference between Republican men and Republican women. Republican men, 46%, say that they are concerned in 2018. Republican women, 64%, and they increased in just 3 years, 14%. So there is a very, very dramatic gender gap among Republicans that we should think about how to utilize. Americans across party lines believe that taking steps to help prevent future climate change will improve their health, help the economy, and increase jobs. So this is a magic kind of solution. We had a lot of carnival barkers in the West where I'm from. And this is the kind of solution they would have sold in a bottle back on those wagon train. So people believe that climate change is much, much bigger. And if anything, we talk about it sometimes too narrowly. The positive impact on health is super important, in part because, number one, health is emerging as a top issue. And it is an issue that combines the political frame, health was the number one issue in the last elections, and a personal frame. If you had, there are the Techno Optimist books, but boy, if Bob had showed you the list of books that deal with self-help and health and well-being, we would have filled this whole auditorium up. You would have had to sit on a stack of books. People also believe that health is a value. It's not just a commodity. It's a value. And women, who are some of the biggest advocates for dealing with climate change, are the healthcare voters, and they are the healthcare advocates. In fact, what's really interesting is healthcare is the one issue where men say the women in their lives tell them what to do. Now, there may be a lot of other issues where we're secretly doing that, but this is the one where they admit it. Green New Deal. First of all, Green New Deal tests pretty popularly, except half of America has no idea what it is. But it sounds good, right? I mean, like, what's the alternative? Old Deal? That doesn't sound too good. And Brown Deal? That doesn't sound too good. We kind of got that one. So Green New Deal sounds good. But when you describe it, It is very, very popular. And here you see just some of that data. And you see 92% of Democrats, 88% of independents, and 2/3 of Republicans like the Green New Deal. By the way, half of America doesn't know what socialism is either. And probably half doesn't know what capitalism is. So people talk about this. The description that we gave was accelerating the transition from fossil fuels to clean renewable energy. Clean renewable energy, really, really popular. By the way, the #1 progressive policy that Trump voters like, green renewable energy. The deal would generate 100% of the nation's electricity from clean renewable sources within the next 10 years, upgrade the nation's energy grid, buildings and transportation infrastructure, increase energy efficiency, invest in technology and development, and provide training for jobs in the green economy. Training for jobs, very, very important, by the way, particularly among Republican and white blue-collar voters. Now, this concept is very popular, so there are opponents to it because it represents a major redistribution in our economy, a major redistribution of power and profits. And when we talk about this, what's interesting is that Fox News has been doing a lot more defining of Green New Deal than CNN or MSNBC. And not only are we in tribes, but we are very siloed now in terms of our communication. One of the things that's really important when we talk about the Green New Deal is to get people to pass on information about the Green New Deal to their friends and family. 1/3 of Americans rely on friends and family for their top information source. So we've got two choices. We can change people's friends or family. Oh, that's a little hard. Or we can make sure that people are hearing not just from Uncle Joe who's listening to Fox News, which is solidly anti-Green New Deal, and people who listen to Fox have dramatically declined in their support for Green New Deal, or we can provide alternative information to crazy Uncle Joe. And we've all got one in our social media network, right? What we really tested in the heart of the matter is solutions. And you can see here, and this is not meant to be any kind of exclusive or exhaustive list. This is just a potpourri, an amuse-bouche, if you will. But all are very solution-oriented. These solutions are mostly national solutions. And it is very, very popular, by the way, for people to look for solutions that they can do in their states and in their local governments. It is also, and this is one of the beauties of the sector work that Eco-America has done, people are also very interested in work, particularly women, that they can do in their communities. But in order here, and all of these are 76 to 87% favorable, and all of them 43 to 54% in favor. By the way, these numbers, all significantly higher than Donald Trump's favorability, all significantly higher than anybody who opposes these provisions. So the provisions themselves are significantly higher than the people who oppose them. Modernizing the grid, charging corporate polluters a fee for the pollution they create, passing laws for efficient buildings and cars, expanding public transit, providing corporate tax credits to expand clean energy, providing personal tax credits for electric or hybrid cars. And you'll notice here, it's really all kinds of different solutions. There are some that are very market-driven. There are some that are very regulatory. There are some that are individualistic. There are some that are more community-oriented. There are some that are spending money. There are some that are regulations. It's amazing that the public is really open to an enormous number of solutions here. Whoops, I'm sorry, I think I hit that too far. Oh, well. The previous slide that you would have seen here showed another set of solutions that were very popular and that had 2/3 support, and again, substantial numbers of people who were in favor of them. Developing new technologies that remove carbon pollution. This is something that people are really intrigued by. They're also not sure exactly how this is going to work, and they're not sure exactly where you're going to put it once you remove that carbon, but still people very intrigued by this idea. Job training and support for communities in transition. This is particularly popular with Republicans. Speeding up transition. Now, speeding up transition is a little bit more partisanly defined. So Democrats and millennials love the idea of speeding up. Republicans are a little bit more conservative about speeding up, but still very popular. 100% of the nation's electricity, nuclear, which is obviously more controversial. I know you've discussed this already, but actually growing in popularity with the public. And then looking for things that transition to energies that reduce carbon pollution. The point of the matter is the public is open to all kinds of solutions. And really, the public dialogue would suggest that people are conservative about this. Actually, the public doesn't know they're supposed to be conservative about this, and they're pretty gun-ho. Funding. Two different propositions here, both very popular. Making polluters pay for the pollution they create. 61% of the public is in favor of this, and only 18% oppose it. This is very strong bipartisanly. Republicans like this too. And then taxing the wealthiest 1%. 61% of the public like this. Now this is the one actually that the Republicans are against. Anytime you hit the wealthy, and this is not unique to climate change or carbon policy. Anytime you hit the wealthy, the Republicans less excited about it and more likely to think, well, you might come down and think I'm wealthy. Democrats are way gung-ho on it. But polluter pay, everyone is excited about it, and independents are very excited about both. So talking about climate change, oops, I think maybe we skipped a slide there. But maybe that's a hint at time. Just real quickly, we want to center it on common values. We want to stay aspirational. We want to remind people that there is consensus. One of the bad things about climate change is people agree with each other, but they think they disagree with each other, which really limits how much women are going to pass on this information because they don't want to divide their networks. So women in particular need to be reminded that there is consensus, and then stay on solutions. 1/3 problem, 2/3 solution. And responding to attacks, which you can look at this slide later, same kind of formula. Start with values, talk about the problem, but then if you really want to respond to attacks, emphasize the solution. So lots to talk about. I'm glad to develop that more in Q&A. And let me turn it over to the next speaker to tell you the next part of the story.
Thanks very much. As Bob mentioned, I'm Karen Florine with Climate Central. And this is the little clicker and making it go that way. Wait a minute. Whoop, that's the pointer. Wait, there we go. Technology is not my forte, apparently. It's not going.
It should work. Just press it hard. Be strong.
All right, be strong. So you've heard a lot of information today about various aspects of the problem. I want to try to give you some specific tools to use in talking about climate. Whoops, that went backwards. There we go. We've also heard a lot that climate is a growing concern, but unfortunately it's except maybe very, very recently over the last few weeks, it hasn't really been a high priority yet. When you look at the polling that Pew has done over the last many years, when they give people a list of items and ask them to prioritize them, climate ends up last or dead last, and that's true as recently as January of this year. In Climate Central, we are working through a number of different programs. One of them involves work with meteorologists around the country. I want to stress that Climate Central is not an advocacy organization. We provide data-based and data-backed information localized to communities. Much of this is distributed through meteorologists through a program that is called Climate Matters. And we have about 600 plus TV meteorologists around the country now using the materials and in 85% of US markets. When it is hot, we share with them in our weekly Climate Matters Bulletin TV-ready graphics on how more hot days are happening, specifically localized to that community. When it is cold, we share with them information about how it is less cold less often. We also do projections. showing that if we stay on the track that we're on, it's going to get a whole lot worse. And we do explainer graphics on key points like the relationship between global temperature and carbon dioxide. We emphasize health issues, and this was one that we did a couple of weeks ago, right at the peak of pollen season, and I'm sure there are a number of allergy sufferers in the room, showing the relationship between the longer growing season that's resulting from climate change and the longer allergy season, and the way that mosquitoes also have a longer season. And sometimes we do things on the lighter side as well, like the relationship of football season warming for all the NFL teams in the country. We are increasingly emphasizing solutions, localized information on solutions, such as the contribution that agriculture in various states can make to reducing carbon concentrations in the air. Just last September, this is the beta version of a tool that combines information on actual installed wind and solar capacity in communities across the country, times their actual weather yesterday, today, and forecast for tomorrow. And when I say tomorrow, I mean literally tomorrow, as in May 2nd, not some far distant horizon. Those are multiplied together to indicate the quantity of wind and solar that is being generated in that locality at that particular time. We are having a much spiffier version of this will launch in mid-June, something that will actually provide TV quality, camera ready visuals again. When we circulate these materials, it's not just the nice graphics. We also provide background information that includes a methodology paragraph. That's important because meteorologists regard themselves as scientists, and they want to be confident in the information that they are using when they go on the air. And every one of these is available in Spanish as well as English. These are all available not just to meteorologists, but to every one of you as well. To get access to the existing ones, you can go to our website, and you can also sign up for Climate Matters so that for your locality, so that you are getting the information each week as we release it. On our website, you go to the media library, and where it says market, that means media market, as in location. You hit a drop-down menu and pick the one you're most interested in as well. We recently expanded Climate Matters in the news to go beyond the weather desk and beyond TV to all beats, all media. And we do that now with a monthly bulletin that provides, again, data-backed, localized information, as well as contacts with experts. We typically accompany that with a more detailed, short report that has sort of additional nerdy type information in it. And increasingly, we're doing it with partnerships journalism, where we co-report, co-produce, and co-publish with local media outlets, often ending up on the front pages of places that you don't normally see front page stories on climate. Increasingly, we're also looking to do this simultaneously in multiple media in a particular location at pretty much a simultaneous basis, so that we're in print, on the radio, and on TV at the same time. The welcome mat is out for ideas that you may have. Very much look forward to hearing from you in the working session that's coming up about particular stories that you think might be well suited to this kind of an approach. That's our Climate Matters program, and now I'll talk even more quickly about Surging Seas, which is our suite of online tools about coastal flooding. You can go to any coastal location in the United States. We give you a summary. You can pick English or Spanish. You can select the water level that you are interested in, and you can also include or exclude storm surge. So it's, in addition to sea level rise itself, the impact from storms as they come along. This will allow you to download a handy-dandy 2-page report, PDF, ready for distribution to whoever you might be talking to, and has key factoids about coastal flooding in your particular community. The Surging Seas Tools Risk Finder, which is available at riskfinder.climatecentral.org, lets you get specific, detailed information. It combines over 100 different databases on population, on infrastructure, on buildings, on contaminated sites. Again, you select the water level of interest to you. If you click on the little information icon anywhere in there, it will give you more background than you can possibly shake a stick at. And if you, when you get to a particular point, if you want to have a PowerPoint or a table on that, you click those little buttons and it automatically generates them for you. We try to do everything that we can think of to make this information as convenient to users as possible. Our most recent addition to RiskFinder is a partnership that we did with Zillow, the real estate folks, that has detailed information on future flood risk to homes and the dates that they were built, which unfortunately indicates that in a number of coastal locations, we're putting more people into harm's way relative to people that in new homes that we are putting in outside those coastal areas. We've also got a zillion different kinds of maps. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into those. Also want to mention that one of our research briefs that was released today is about faith and flooding and how sea level will impact houses of worship in coastal communities around America. If you're looking for something with more visuals and less words, we have a number of different types of approaches. One of them is photorealistic images, and another is iconic locations, such as the Wall Street Bowl, which looks like that with 8 feet of sea level rise. So we not only welcome, we invite and encourage you to use these tools, whether you're using the Climate Matters or the Sea Level Rise, because only by making it real and local will we make it personal, and that's the way it becomes a priority. Thank you.
Go, Joe.
Hello. Thank you. Thank Bob and Eco America. Well, there are 3 secrets to engagement, but you'll have to wait a bit longer to hear them since, I have to keep you engaged. So engagement famously means a state of having entered into a promise of marriage. But it also means a battle between armies. Don't worry, I'm not going to make any jokes about those being the same. All the world's greatest stories have been about one of those 2 types of intense engagement, love or war, or both, as in the case of Homer's epic poems and the new Avengers movie. Etymology.com says the word engage comes from to pledge. The pledge could be to marry, or to fight. Bonding and picking sides have always been essential to human relationships because we are a social and tribal animal. Which brings us to the other related meaning of engage, the one this panel is about, quote, attract and occupy the attention of. Online, we call that being clicky and sticky. But really, that's what we're trying to do in every single form of communications. Attract someone's attention and then keep it long enough to get some sort of pledge, action, or promise. A pledge to vote or donate money or march, but at its most basic, a pledge to join our team, our fight, our cause. Yet even though trying to attract and keep the attention of others is central to our lives on a daily basis, the secrets are not taught in school, and higher education actually teaches us how to be boring, with facts and numbers and charts. What got me to research and write a book on the secrets of engagement was when my oldest brother, Dave, died unexpectedly in September 2017. I loved my big brother, but it was only in planning his memorial and hearing each eulogy that I realized he was a master of engagement who touched the lives of everyone he met in that corny way George Bailey does in the movie It's a Wonderful Life. One thing about funerals, though, people don't use PowerPoint presentations. They tell stories because that's how we remember people. The word eulogy literally means good words or good stories. And that's the biggest secret. The basis for engagement is getting people to remember you. Remember what you said and remember how you made them feel. One of the brain's subconscious rules of thumb is that easily recalled things are true. And evolution has wired our brains to remember stories and metaphors. And that's why Jeff Bezos in his 2018 shareholder letter said, "We don't do PowerPoint presentations at Amazon. Instead, we write narratively structured 6-page memos." He understood that people don't think in bullets or numbers, they think in stories. But Bezos made one mistake in that letter. Quote, "It would be extremely hard to write down the detailed requirements that make up a great memo." Actually, it's not, and that's why I wrote my book, How to Go Viral and Reach Millions. The top engagement secret is that when you tell your stories, you need to use the narrative structure that creates emotional engagement, the classical 3-act structure: first the setup, second the conflict, and third the resolution or personal change. In short, the hero's journey. That secret is the and, but, therefore, ABT trick you may have heard of. It's also called the rule of replacing by Trey Parker, Creative South Park, and the Book of Mormons. ABT is simply replacing the word and in your speech or writing with the word but or equivalents like yet, wherever possible, to introduce conflict and narrative tension as we expect in all of our best stories. You also replace and with therefore or equivalents like so to introduce the resolution. It may seem hard to believe that such a simple trick, simple idea could be so powerful, but literally every viral, high engagement speech in history makes use of this structure and these specific words. In fact, perhaps the highest engagement speech in all of history, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, has a remarkable 29 buts and 13 therefores. Since all of us are seeking major political change, telling and retelling your truthful story, your hero's journey, is doubly important because the side opposing climate action keeps telling their false story in which we are the villains. Of course, you don't just need a good story, you need to be able to communicate it to a large and varied audience again and again and again. And the only cheap way to do that these days is online, where you can also cheaply test and micro-target the messages. We never publish anything on Think Progress that isn't tested. Testing by the big data firm Cambridge Analytica using hacked Facebook data gave Trump the high engagement metaphors "drain the swamp" and "deep state." In 2016, the Trump campaign tested 50,000 messages a day online, and they are doing again now. Right now, progressives and scientists and environmentalists lag far behind the deniers, the Trump team, and the Russians in using the full set of online engagement tools. Online, they have created the greatest single engagement engine in human history. It's why Trump won. It's why the news site that has by far the most engagement on Facebook in 2019 is Fox News. We are getting out-engaged online so badly, as I wrote last week on Think Progress, Facebook's newest fact-checkers are Koch-funded climate deniers. At least that was a high-engagement headline, very widely shared. You may have seen it, seen by over 1 million people. The good news is there are progressives and environmentalists who understand the new world of engagement. We call them millennials and young people. That's why the most successful engagement effort our community has seen in years is the Green New Deal, which has changed the entire conversation in this country. The Green New Deal uses all the secrets. It's built around a powerful metaphor, which is built in turn around 2 stories that connect emotionally with Americans, the New Deal and the mobilization for World War II. It is solution-focused, but it's also marketed by the right messengers, young people who have the moral authority to demand we do more, and they make extensive and repeated use of social media, led by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is a pro at online engagement. But the bad news is the deniers are still better at this than we are. Fox News and Republican leaders have been demonizing AOC and the Green New Deal around the clock, so much so that a poll that's just like a month after your poll that Vox, David Roberts wrote about and I wrote about, showed that while voters supported a key new Green New Deal goal, 100% carbon-free electricity, by 3-1, it also found that support for the Green New Deal itself was only 43%, while opposition was 46%. That is the name, when you give people the name Green New Deal. Even worse, the intensity of opposition was considerably stronger than the intensity of support. Only 24% strongly support the Green New Deal, while 43% strongly oppose the plan. Nearly twice as many Republicans as Democrats actually reported hearing about the plan, quote, quite, quote, a lot. That is to say, Republicans have heard, twice as many Republicans have heard a lot about the Green New Deal than Democrats. Now that is successful engagement in just a matter of weeks. Finally, since we are doing so poorly in this area, I am going to be launching a major online engagement effort next month with some real pros. So if anybody in the audience is interested in partnering in this, please let me know. I'll be around. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before lunch, Lisa said at the end of her panel that she was moderating that she'd always hoped that climate change would force us to say stop, to stop the degradations to the planet and to stop the degradations to each other. And my talk is going to focus on the latter, about the need to stop the degradations to each other in our political discourse and how we talk about climate change and how we relate to each other. One of the pieces I wrote at Scientific American is about these public opinion trends that we've talked about today. My argument, being someone who studied public opinion for the last 15 years on climate change, that we've reached the point where we've won the battle for public opinion. If you look at the polls, this might change depending on what happens with the economy. We have sufficient conditions from a public opinion standpoint to pass legislation. I think the real battle now is how we relate amongst each other as a community of people working on climate change, and then with people that we see as our opponents, and that's going to be the focus of my talk. Okay, let's see here. Oh, great, okay. Robbers Cave State Park in Oklahoma is known today for its 3 lakes, boulder-strewn trails, and caverns that were once used by the outlaw Jesse James as a hideout. For 3 weeks in 1954, the park was also the setting for one of the most famous experiments in social psychology. In the Robbers Cave study, Muzaffar Sharif and colleagues recruited 22 fifth-grade boys, chosen to be identical in social background, to attend what they billed as a specially designed summer camp. Split into the Eagles and the Rattlers, during the first week, the 2 teams were kept separate from each other, participating in a variety of bonding activities. At the start of the second week, they were told of the other team's existence. Having never met each other, the boys quickly began to refer to the other team as outsiders, intruders, and those boys at the other end of the camp. Following a series of competitive games, the boys' rivalry grew more intense. The boys started hurling insults, calling each other pigs, bums, sissies, babies, and cheaters. Their perception of reality mutated when the Eagles and Rattlers were asked to gather up beans from the ground and shown via pictures how many were collected. Each boy estimated more beans for their own team than their rivals, even though the number of beans displayed for each group had been equal. Fueled by competition and social isolation from each other, the teams raided the rivals' cabins late at night. The Eagles burned the Rattlers' flag, and some boys started collecting rocks to use against each other. Worried about physical injury, the experimenters called a halt to the competition. 60 years later, the Robbers Cave study is a metaphor for today's hyper-partisan politics. Almost every policy debate is a competition between 2 intensely hostile teams, in which partisans engage in relentless stereotyping, prejudice, and emotional volatility, writes the political scientist Liliana Mason in her 2018 book, Uncivil Disagreement: How Politics Became Identity. In these conflicts, those on the right and left oppose compromise by their political leaders, view the other party as extreme but not their own, believe that their side should get the most out of any decision, and blame the other party for incivility. In a recent study co-authored by Mason, more than 40% of Democrats and Republicans viewed the opposing party as, quote, downright evil. Incredibly, 20% of Democrats and 16% of Republicans said they believed on occasion that the country would be better off if large numbers of the opposition died. Nearly 1 out of 5 Republicans and Democrats, as reported by Thomas Edsall of the New York Times, agreed with the statement that their political adversaries lack, quote, lack the traits to be considered fully human. They behave like animals. If the opposing party won the 2020 election, 18% of Democrats and 14% of Republicans agreed with the statement that violence would be justified. The best educated, informed partisans tend to be the most intensely tribal, engaging in my-side reasoning that prioritizes victory over a desire for the greater good. Research shows that the best educated partisans are quick to endorse their party's policy positions, not as a matter of principle, writes Edsel, but as a public act designed to signal their tribal loyalty as a Democrat or Republican. On no other issue are such animosities, prejudices, and biases more prevalent and more harmful to progress than on climate change. As climate change advocates, we've been told that we must be more like we imagine our political opponents to be, more ruthless, more cunning, more aggressive, more willing to bend facts to our side, and more committed to the most audacious and ambitious policies, regardless of their flaws. We're all too quick to rally around the banner of those voices who emphasize us versus them, good guys versus bad guys, and winning versus losing. We view those opposed to action on climate change as extreme, but seldom apply the same label to those on our side. Green New Deal advocates, for example, have framed the choice for Americans in starkly binary terms. Either join us in a utopian quest to transform the United States into a social democracy, or face the catastrophic consequences of a dystopian climate future. There are no other choices. Their battle is as much against moderates and pragmatists as it is against conservatives, I write in a recent column at Issues in Science and Technology magazine. Quote, moderate is not a stance, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told the audience at the 2019 South by Southwest Ideas Festival. It's just an attitude towards life of like, meh. As a community, we've become obsessed with the psychology and communication strategies of conservative quote-unquote deniers, reinforcing a bunker mentality that is highly resistant to legitimate criticism or alternative ideas. In doing so, we fail to see that the prejudice and animosity we direct towards conservatives and Republicans is little different from racism and religious bigotry. Yet the more we become angry and the more we catastrophize about the future, the less likely we are to find common ground or even be able to treat our political opponents as human beings. Playing to the most basic elements of human nature, social media has done great damage to the climate change movement, destroying our ability to think collectively and discuss thoughtfully across lines of difference. Artificial intelligence-driven platforms with almost perfect information about us serve up a constant stream of news and commentary that reflects our existing biases and beliefs rather than content that might challenge them. Those specializing in the dark arts of social media engagement have used these platforms to hack our brains, training our focus on conservatives in the fossil fuel industry doing evil things as the end times loom. Because it kidnaps our attention, the most angry, most inflammatory, most outrageous, and most catastrophic content is rewarded by social media algorithms, ensuring that it travels the furthest. When we share and like this type of content on Facebook and Twitter, we engage in a public performance that signals to others our cultural and political affiliations, writes the University of Virginia Sivya Vaidyanathan in his 2018 book, Anti-Social Media. Since social media is a place where we find comfort in our tribal identity, posting generates social value, regardless of the source, quality, or veracity of the content we may be sharing. When claims are challenged, such as the viability of a 100% path to renewables or the political feasibility of the Green New Deal, we stick by the claim and attack the critic, further demonstrating our loyalty. In doing so, we often follow the lead of a climate blogger or Twitter micro-celebrity who, through their commentary, make it easy for us to remain loyal to ideas or policy proposals that become stand-ins for what it means to be a climate hawk or activist. There can be no progress on climate change until we rebuild our civic capacity to discuss, debate, and disagree in ways that do not turn every aspect of climate policy into an identity-driven tribal war between good and evil. We must harness our organizational resources and personal gifts to serve not as partisan persuaders, but as partners in face-to-face dialogue with other Americans and decision-makers, embracing our common humanity. Quote, moderation is not an ideology, it is a way of being. It stands for humility of the head and ardor in our heart, writes the New York Times' David Brooks in a recent column. When you listen to your neighbor, you see how many perspectives there are, and you're intellectually humble in the face of that pluralism. When you listen to your neighbor, you see that deep down we're the same, and you hunger to deepen that connection, he writes. But to embrace our common humanity, we must adopt and encourage a practice of what Georgetown University's Cal Newport calls digital minimalism, a philosophy that helps you question what digital communication tools add the most value to your life. It is impossible to resist the siren song of climate tribalism if, like the average American, you spend several hours a day on your smartphone, swiping, scrolling, skimming, liking, hearting, retweeting, forwarding, and responding to other people's thoughts, especially if they apply to climate change politics. When a new IPCC report is released or the proposed Green New Deal is announced, your first thought in today's newsfeed culture of righteousness is not your own, but almost inevitably someone else's appealing to your worst biases. Spending less time on social media or your smartphone will free up mental energy for contemplation and deep reading of a diversity of high-quality sources, alone with your thoughts, wrestling with uncertainties and complexities, scrutinizing your assumptions and beliefs. Minimizing your social media use will also enable you to be more present and less judgmental during face-to-face discussions. To close, the initial focus of a conversation about a contentious topic like climate change with a neighbor, community member, or elected official, as I wrote in a recent report from the American Association for the Advancement of Science, should be simply to recognize and affirm shared identities, ideals, and beliefs. Reframing climate change in terms of public health or religious duty, for example, can at times establish the context in which a more thoughtful conversation can take place. But there are no magic messages capable of overcoming false beliefs or converting someone to your side. But with trust and relationships established, further dialogue can focus on working together towards common goals related to energy decarbonization and societal resilience. If common goals on a specific topic may not exist, investing in more thoughtful conversations and the forums to engage in those conversations, like this meeting today, can at least help reestablish the norms of civility that have been lost in our society, enabling climate change advocates and those with whom we disagree to come to respect the nature and reason for our differences. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Celinda, Karen, Joe, and Matt. Megan, how much time do we have, or Ashley? Do we have any time?
Yeah.
We're done? 5 minutes at most. There's so many interesting things to talk about here. You know, the polarization things where, you know, we're socialists and they're fascists, and how you do that. We are inclusive. We're Big Tent. We try to bring everybody together. We don't like it if things aren't balanced in a room, and then you go look at the White House and you take a look at the staff there and you say, what kind of balance is in a staff like that? But so like the thing is like, what do we do? I mean, you know, my last comment was going to just be about Trump. I mean, you know, just his lies are documented over and over, and I could go on and on about, you know, things about Trump, you know, and then how could, like, my best friend in 50 years be a supporter of Donald Trump, vote for the guy and still strenuously argue for him? And I have my answer to that. But, you know, like, what do we do when we have a society like this and we have personal relationships that are being defined more by external political things than are being defined by our relationships with people that, you know, might have lasted 50 years? So anybody have any solutions? I need a global solution to the whole problem now. Come on, be bold.
Yeah, well, look, I think there are two separate issues. There's how we interact on a personal level, and that, you know, I certainly think we have to make as much of an effort to communicate as possible. When you move into the political realm, and particularly the national political realm, the fact is there are two information distribution systems in this country. And, you know, I don't think it's fair to say both sides are equally to blame. We're trying to operate on a science-based level. And the other side is very well funded by, you know, people who are trying to block climate action and a number of other things that would injure major corporate interests. And that's why, you know, you get a statement like Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell last Monday vowed to be the Grim Reaper who will kill what he labeled socialist legislation, including the Green New Deal, advocated by AOC and, quote, nutcases running around on the fringe. But the important thing to remember, and this is the point that Dave Roberts made in Vox, is that whatever major solution is put forward that could actually address climate change is going to be smeared as socialist. It doesn't matter. First, when it was a carbon tax and a BTU tax, when it was cap and trade, which was actually, a conservative Republican idea, it was as trashed as the Green New Deal. And there are only three solutions, right? You're going to have a carbon tax, you're going to have a cap and trade, or you're going to have a regulatory system, which of course was executive overreach by President Obama, or you're going to have a massive clean energy investment. Those are the only four things that you could possibly imagine to solve this problem, and they have been vilified and rejected. So this is simply right now at the national political level, this is about who can get their people out to vote.
So what do we do?
Well, you had me until the conclusion, and I would say, first of all, they haven't been vilified. Those things, if you test them in a neutral context, are to the extent the public understands them, very, very popular. Secondly, I think one of the solutions is the premise of this conference, to focus on the solutions and not have to have everybody come. Right now we're in a situation where if you don't believe that it's human-made, then I don't want to hear if you would agree with me on a solution. Well, the public is like, who cares? You don't believe it's human-made, fine. I mean, we have a common interest here. We can, when I grew up on a ranch, my parents disagreed with the neighbors on everything. But we would join with the Mileses every year to repair fence together. And I remember one time I said to my dad, but I thought we didn't like Mr. Miles. And my dad said, okay, well, don't repeat that, number one. And number two, it doesn't matter whether we like him or not. We need to repair this fence together. We need to invest in solar and wind energy. It doesn't matter whether we agree on the premise or not. The Democrats, and I say this as a self-critique, we want to get the taxes released from Donald Trump. You know what the voters think? I know he didn't pay any taxes. I don't need to see it. He wasn't in line in H&R Block behind me. He had accountants that got him out of taxes. Drop it. Enough. Let's move on. So I think actually a solutions frame is the way to move beyond this. And people are a lot more likely to say, wait a minute, people disagree on whether it's human caused or not, and they don't want to get into it. Why can't we all agree that we should double solar energy? If we build a new school, let's put a solar energy panel on it. Hell, one of my favorite stories, the Coal Museum in Kentucky, powered by solar panels. God, I feel bad for the poor staffer who suggested that, but, let's move ahead on solutions. Let's not worry if we agree on the premises.
And it's worth noting in passing that the extenders for wind and solar were actually quietly passed by a Republican Congress in 2015.
Yeah, I'll just say that, if you look at our political system, we have a systemic problem in that our political system rewards the tail ends of the political spectrum in terms of who's able to get through a primary system and then who runs in a non-competitive election. A long-term solution is to think about reforms to our political system that don't reward the most ideological, but reward people that are able to work on the center left and the center right in a pragmatic way around solutions and don't think of each other as the other or in evil terms, as some people tend to do. The other thing is, if you look at Democrats over the last 50 years have controlled the White House and both chambers of Congress for a total of 8 years, 8 out of 50 years. We are in an era, and we will continue to live in an era of eternally divided government. Any policy change we're able to achieve will be incremental before it's transformative. And that is one of the problems with the Green New Deal is that, yes, it has it's elevated the profile of climate change as a policy issue. It's certainly mobilized the grassroots on the left and among progressive voters, but there's nothing about that package that is even a conversation starter with those on the center right. However, there are a series of other, if you disconnect climate policy from a social democracy agenda, then you can start to see the possibility of some type of negotiation moving forward. Any policy that's going to pass through Congress needs to have support from at least some conservatives and also at least from industry. That's just the political reality we live in. And those are among some of the things that we need to think about politically. And that's one reason why I think the Green New Deal is problematic. As much as much mobilization has happened around and as much excitement has happened.
Can I add to your reform? We need to have campaign finance reform too, because as long as we rely on big dollars, we're relying on corporate interests. And frankly, as long as we rely on small donors, we're going to rely on energized fringe bases. We need public financing of campaigns.
Yeah, and I'll just say that I think the other thing is the danger and what really derails us is we think about we have 12 years to solve this. We're not going to solve climate change. It's something we're going to manage. We're going to do better or worse at managing it over the long term. The rhetoric around 12 years, we fall off a cliff, it just emboldens the most ambitious pie-in-the-sky type policies and eliminates any type of need for actual collaboration and compromise and to think about these longer-term systemic problems. This is something that we're going to have to work on politically and technologically and scientifically and socially for the next century, right? It's not a 12-year time scale. And that's why we need to engage in slow thinking.
The problem is the science is pretty, unfortunately, for this discussion, we have the science. Yeah. And the science is clear. You don't, if the world does not cut emissions 30 to 50% by 2030, then we have left the next generation a planet they can't fix. So we are at the realm of morality here, and we are at the realm where it is going to be raw political power that determines. As long as Mitch McConnell is Senate Majority Leader, there is not going to be action to save the planet and your children and future generations from decades, if not centuries, of catastrophically worse climate. So, unfortunately, this is the world that we're in now, and we don't have a lot of time to fix it. And that's, by the way, why young people are not going to school, and why there's, an extinction movement, and why there is the Sunrise Movement.
Right. And I'm getting these two women over here are like, wait a second, you can come out, you can join the conversation.
But yeah, I would just say we're not talking honestly about the 1.5 and 2 degree target, Joe, and you know that, right? It's based, most of the IPCC models are based on bioenergy and carbon capture that we don't know how to do if we're going to get to 1.5 and 2. There's no
That's
IPCC.
Why it's more urgent to start now. Yeah. I tend to agree with you.
Right.
Mass carbon capture and storage is tough, but
Anybody
that's just a statement. We have to act sharply now.
It's our turn to talk. We've heard you guys talk and talk. You're over time. There's correct. Our next session is our turn to talk.
I like that guy. Yay! Okay. So we're going to conclude this session. I had some closing comments, but forget about them.
Thank you.
Let's all do whatever they say.
All right, guys, before you leave, though, thank you, everyone. Another round of applause for these guys.